Hello and welcome back to Rap Cinema. Today we will be talking about a rock climbing adventure that turns into a living nightmare when a woman catches the murder of her best friend on camera. With nowhere to go and with the murderers chasing her, she is forced to ascend up a mountain cliff, but what she encounters will shock you. The movie starts off by introducing us to the main character Kelly and her best friend Sophie. Kelly is getting her climbing gear ready while Sophie continues to film her, but they are interrupted by a loud group of men pulling up outside their cabin. The group are cheering and screaming, but Joshua and Sophie soon lock eyes, eventually resulting in him calling at their cabin later in the day. They introduce each other and Joshua invites them out to a party they're having, but with Kelly being visibly uncomfortable, they decline the offer. Later in the day, Zach talks to the locals who have said that no one has been able to get past the ledge due to the coldness and the ice that has set. With no regards to their safety, Taylor and Reynolds are still determined to do it. Back at the cabin, Sophie is persuading Kelly to have at least one drink with the boys, and after not much convincing, she finally agrees to go to the party. Later that night, everyone is gathered around a fire pit chatting and laughing away, but just as Kelly gets up to leave, Joshua grabs her by the arm and attempts to get her to stay, but his friends demand that he lets her go. Now with Kelly back at the cabin, she looks through old videos of her late husband who used to be her climbing partner, and after a few minutes of reminiscing, she puts the camera away. While she is tucked into her bed, Sophie is making out with Joshua, even though the man has a wife, but anyway she gets up to go pee and Joshua follows her. Just as Sophie finishes up, Joshua appears behind her and spares no time and tries to kiss her. This time round she refuses, but Joshua still forces himself onto her, but she is able to scratch his face and get away for a brief moment, until she is forced to the ground. Fortunately the screaming was heard by the other boys, causing one of them to tackle Joshua to the ground, which gives Sophie time to run off. As Sophie runs away, the group of boys corner and grab her, with an initial plan of just talking about the incident. Sophie clearly thought something else was going to happen, so she bites Zach's finger, which causes a massive scream that woke Kelly up from her sleep. Joshua takes things into his own hands and punches Sophie, which causes her to fall off the side of the mountain. The group look down the side of the mountain to see that Sophie is still alive but incapable of moving, while Kelly arrives at the fire pit to notice that the group isn't there anymore. She grows more concerned while she looks around, but eventually moves off to look for everyone. The guys are now hovering over Sophie, and after realizing the severity of the situation, Reynolds tries to phone the police. Joshua sees this and throws his phone away as he doesn't want the police to know what he did. This causes a massive argument between all the boys as Reynolds seems to be the only one concerned about the situation. While they talk about potential charges and their next move, the commotion is heard by Kelly, who makes her way towards the loud voices. With Sophie begging for her life, Joshua grabs a rock, but Reynolds attempts to stop him, causing him to be thrown up a wall and have a knife pulled on him. Joshua eventually grabs the rock again and smashes it against Sophie's head. These noises continue to grab Kelly's attention, and eventually she gets her camera out, until she comes across the group of boys. She lifts up the camera to record the group, catching the moment that they throw Sophie off the side of a cliff. In a state of panic, she lets out a scream which grabs the group's attention. She falls back and runs up the mountain, but at this point the group realize it's Kelly and start to chase after her. They start to catch up to her, and of course now is the time that she falls and drops the camera. Just as she grabs the camera and gets back up, one of the boys is clotheslined by a tree branch, giving her some extra time. The chase intensifies as one of the guys are able to rip Kelly's jacket off her, but eventually she hides behind a rock. The group panic and come up with a plan to split up and look for her, not knowing that she's 6 feet away from them. As they split up, Kelly is able to run towards the cabin, but she ends up running into Reynolds, but luckily he lets her go. She makes it to her cabin and she grabs all of her climbing gear before making a run for it again, rather than just grabbing the car keys and driving away. Anyway, they have somehow ran into the morning time and they still haven't caught her, but with them being close behind she makes it to the base of the mountain and she begins to climb it. Taylor follows her up the mountain and is eventually able to catch up to her. With the hope that he pulls her off the mountain, he grabs her bag, which causes her to drop the camera into a tiny opening. He continues to grab her bag, but loses his grip as the climbing gear that he's holding on to falls out off the bag, causing him to almost fall back down to the bottom. Kelly, now with a head start, makes her way towards the camera and regains possession of it again. However, this closes the distances between them both, creating an opening for Taylor to grab onto her. Although, Kelly manages to retaliate by delivering a well-aimed kick that sends Taylor to the bottom of the mountain again, resulting in only a minor injury. With Taylor now injured, the group rush back to the cabin and force feed him painkillers and alcohol for his pain, but they reluctantly leave him behind as they must find Kelly. Now with one man down, Joshua, Zach and Reynolds hike back up to the base of the mountain and watch as Kelly ascends up. They are confident that she'll not make it to the top given the harsh weather conditions and lack of equipment, therefore they decide to climb up to where the trail begins, so that they are able to get above her. Just before commencing their ascent, Joshua goes back to the cabin to get his gloves, and in the meantime, Reynolds suggests that they turn Joshua in, but Zach shuts him down. The weather conditions slowly begin to worsen as Kelly moves further on up the mountain, and to add to her concerns, a snake appears from nowhere and crawls over her hand. She stays still in fear, but the snake luckily doesn't attack. Back near the bottom of the mountain, the guys have started their ascent but are making slow progress because they're pussies. Further up the mountain, the guys have reached the mountain trail and are walking up with ease, while Kelly has reached a point where she cannot ascend any further, but luckily there is a bit of rope on the side of the mountain. She isn't able to reach it normally, but she's able to use wire from her bag to grab a hold of it, and in a leap of faith, she swings off it and grabs a hold of a steady rock. To her surprise, she notices gear that's been left at the side of the mountain, which she is able to climb towards, but just as she's about to move off, the boys walk up onto the ledge that she is below. Without knowing that they are above her, Kelly continues to grunt and breathe heavy, which catches Joshua's attention. He begins to taunt her but soon offers her a deal, the camera for her life. They lower a rope down with the hope that she'll attach the camera to it, but instead she grabs the rope and attaches a piece of paper to it. Now with Kelly trapped with no way up or down, they decide to wait for her. In the meantime, Kelly tends to her injured fingers and employs a clip through a small crevice in order to move the climbing gear closer to her. Nighttime has now hit and Kelly has got the makeshift bed set up for herself, which she climbs into while praying that the clip will not fail her. After more than 24 hours with no sleep, she finally attempts to get some rest, however she is forced up as the guys have filled a bag up with gear and recklessly launch it at her. She falls out of the bed but is able to grab onto the side of it, but as soon as the bag comes back again, she grabs onto it. In an attempt to pull the bag back up with no success, Joshua notices that she is holding onto it and cuts the rope, but she is able to grab back onto the same ledge. She climbs back up to safety and gets back into the makeshift bed again, where she is finally able to rest, or so we thought, as she is woken up by a rope creaking. She's visibly confused but is soon jump scared by Zach, who has been lowered down to her bed. He rips into the covers and threatens Kelly to give him the camera, but as he is searching for it, she grabs a knife and stabs him in the shoulder. She wasn't finished there as she grabs Zach's knife and lounges towards him. Not the smartest idea, but we roll. With them now dangling with no way to swing back to the ledge, Zach gets the other boys to pull him up while Kelly is still holding on. When they get to the top, Joshua is able to get Kelly off him and she falls back down to the makeshift bed. Unfortunately for Kelly, just as she gets back onto the ledge, the clip that held the bed up fails and it falls to the bottom of the mountain. Later in the night, with Joshua now asleep, the other two agree that they need to get off the mountain, and that they think Joshua killed Taylor whenever he went to get his gloves before their ascent. Eventually, after discovering that Joshua isn't calling anyone for help, the other two decide to use Joshua's watch to activate the emergency beacon on it. Reynolds slowly creeps over to Joshua, but just as he gets to the watch, he awakens and throws Reynolds to the ground, almost throwing him off the cliff. What was left of their friendship slowly burned to ash as Joshua proudly admits to sleeping with Zach's girlfriend. They are now all disgruntled, but Joshua ignores this to bribe Kelly for the camera, who respectfully declines. Later in the night, Zach gets up to go for a pee, but Joshua appears behind him and hits him with a hammer, then throws him over the edge, along with his equipment. Soon after, Reynolds wakes up and questions Zach's whereabouts, which Joshua lies about and says that he took the trail back down again. Now with only 2 men left, Reynolds decides to go down towards Kelly by himself in hope to retrieve the camera. As he descends down, he acts innocent to gain her trust, but Kelly reveals to him that Zach is in fact dead. He is in disbelief, but eventually Kelly gives him the camera and gets her to scream to pretend that he killed her. He makes it up to Joshua, who reluctantly pulls him back up again. Just as Joshua looks at the camera, he notices that the memory card isn't in it and questions Reynolds about it, but as he doesn't have it, he sets the camera back down. Following this, Reynolds grabs his phone to call Taylor, just to check if his theories about Joshua killing him were correct, which he soon finds out are correct as Joshua has Taylor's phone. This results in Reynolds pulling a hammer out and attempting to bash Joshua's head in, but this goes horribly wrong as Joshua gets him to the ground, whacks his head of the rocks, ties him up, sets him on fire and kicks him off the cliff, where he dangles until the fire snaps the rope and he falls to his death. Major L. Joshua is now sitting alone, with Kelly staying as quiet as possible, assuming that he thinks that she is dead, until he starts talking to her. Knowing she'll have to defend herself, she notices the knife that Zach dropped and makes her way over to it. After obtaining it, she heads back to the ledge, But when she gets back, Joshua lowers himself down to her level. After attempting to reason with her, he gives up and lunges towards her with the hammer, getting a good slice at her leg. He tries to reason with her again, but this time she gives him a false location to where the memory card is and gets bitten by a snake instead. Reasoning is off the table now, so he gets onto the same ledge and brutally beats Kelly, but she's able to hit him and cut his rope, resulting in him falling off the ledge, but the lucky man was able to still hold on. He's now begging for his life, so Kelly decides to get down on one knee to save him, or so he thought. Lol, she only wanted the necklace that he stole off her and he let him fall to his death. Just before he fell, Kelly triggered the emergency beacon on his watch with hope that someone will save her. The movie ends with Kelly climbing to the top of the mountain and a helicopter coming to save her. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to turn on notifications to get the best rap cinema updates.